Hey everyone, it's Jim from Valves & More, an online vintage tube store. And today in Tube Lab number 217, we're going to talk about how to troubleshoot a lost channel. Or when a channel goes down, what to do. But first, caution everyone, electronics and tube amplifiers can have very high voltages present, which can be lethal. Exercise extreme caution when working around them. Always consult a professional technician when in doubt. Well, Charles is on a well-earned and deserved vacation, and in fact, he's probably just landed on the other side of the world. He was in the air all night. He's got another short flight to make, and then he'll be at his destination. So I haven't had a text from him. He usually sends me texts at each leg to let me know that everything's okay. So hopefully he's doing well. And he'll still be answering some technical questions that come in via email, but I'll try and handle as many of them as I can. Now, last week we talked about troubleshooting fuses and how a fuse can actually wear out with nothing being wrong with your amp. And a viewer shared an excellent observation in the comments section in which he said, a fuse that wears out over time indicates a fuse that's correctly sized for the application. Now, what he's saying is the fuse isn't such a large value that it won't break even when it should, and it's not so small a value it breaks on a regular basis, for no good reason. A big thank you to everyone who takes the time to write constructive comments like that one. Now caution, if you replace a fuse with the correct rating and it promptly breaks, you now know you have a problem that needs repairing before the gear is put back into service. Okay, so if your number one focus when troubleshooting should be the tubes, and your number three should be the fuses, what in the heck is number two when you're doing troubleshooting? Well, I guess you guessed it, it's the cables. I remember years ago I was in a high-end listening room and was settling in to check out a $10,000 speaker. Yep, that's $10K per speaker. When I noticed I was only hearing the left channel. The salesman started troubleshooting the source, which was, a reasonable place to start, but wasn't looking at the cables. So after 10 minutes of him getting nowhere, I said, "What about the cables?" And he said, "These are crazy expensive cables. They never go down." Well, as you guessed it, the right-hand patch cable had a fault, and replacing it promptly fixed the problem. Now, you may still be thinking what I thought of those $10,000 speakers. Well, I could hear a crossover issue between the mid-range and treble, and honestly, my current homebrew speakers sounded significantly more natural than those huge boxes with the nautical-themed tweeters. Okay, let's jump right into troubleshooting cables. So there's lots of different types of cables, but there's two significant kinds that we'll come across most often. One is an unbalanced RCA type, and the other is a balanced type of cable. This is actually a mono connection. We can figure that out because there's only 3 pins. So in an unbalanced cable, we have the signal carried on the center conductor, and that's it. There's a shield ground return path that is a braid on the outside, and that's all there is to the cable construction. With balanced connections, you'll have a hot or positive phase and a cold or neutral or negative phase and a ground connection. So the signal is split into 2 components when it's moving through a balanced cable. So this would be, this is a high quality connector. This is what I use for all of my microphone cable constructions. And this is a Nutric connector. You can tell right away, that's good Swiss quality. Well worth the money. But often our modern systems will be using mini XLRs. And this is actually a stereo. It's tough to see, but there's 5 5 connections on this female jack. So this would handle a stereo balanced signal, and in this case we're actually not bringing it to balanced connectors, we're bringing it to a pair of RCA, so a right jack and a left jack, and this is how we get the signal off our digital music player and over into our main critical listening system. When we're listening to digital, we're more often than not listening to analogs, to vinyl, or to tape, reel to reel. We have almost never do we have a problem with these larger connectors. There's a large surface area, the cables are big and robust. We choose the highest quality cable and materials because, you know, when you're setting up to record something, you really don't want to have a fault and find out after you've made the best recording you've ever done and it's got some scratch or you've lost the signal, or it comes in and out. With this type, the mini XLR types, we have a lot of problems, and it's not hard to see why. They're smaller, the solder connections in here are really finicky, and I've had problems with commercial cables. We make these up ourselves. This end here we made up and applied to an existing cable, and yeah, so we have more problems with these. I would say these are sort of in between the gold standard for studio cabling and home audio. We don't often have problems with cables, particularly with our custom built cables, but we do have problems. And I'm going to show you what the most common problem is, and that's oxidization. I did a whole episode on this, so we're not going to spend too long with it, but basically a layer of oxide builds up. It doesn't matter the quality of the connectors, it will build up over time. If you've got gold plating, silver plating, and there's a bunch of other metal combinations that are in use, it'll be a thin coating, it'll wear off, or you'll see some corrosion. Now, with pure gold, you shouldn't, but I've seen what's supposed to be pure gold connectors, not the whole thing, obviously, or I'd be melting them down and retiring. Actually, I don't ever want to retire, but you get the idea. I'd probably be spending more time on a beach somewhere warm in the wintertime. Yeah, I've seen a lot more problems, actually, with gold-plated connectors than I have with nickel-plated. And anyways, it's quite easy to clean them up. Your friend when cleaning up terminals and jacks is 99% isopropyl alcohol and deoxit. And this comes in a really handy little brush applicator, so you can put a little drop onto a cleaning tool like this, and you can get into these, and you'd be amazed. You know, a jack like this that's only been in service for a year will turn this black with the oxide that we pull off of it. Now, some of it, of course, came from this side, and some of it developed inside of here. And of course, miniature Q-tips are always handy for cleaning, and these flat guides are really quite useful for getting in and, you know, cleaning in between here. So what you don't want to do is clean your terminals and your jacks with something abrasive. You want to go in there pretty softly, because if there's a plated metal, you don't want to strip that off. All you want to do is clean, you know, the gunk that got in there, the dirt. You should never be touching any of this stuff with your bare fingers, because you'll leave a layer of oil behind that'll definitely cause problems. But isopropyl alcohol will get that off in a hurry. Now, so the connections are often the fault. But what about in the middle of the cable? Do the cables break? Very, very infrequently. If they're going to break or have a connection issue, it's going to be mostly internal at the jacks, or at the terminal ends. This is a Blue Jeans broken down cable. They were kind enough to provide one years ago for us. I mean, for a long while, we had nothing but Blue Jeans cables in our entire critical listening system, our subsystems, even on our test benches, where whenever we needed a standard audio cable, we would have Blue Jeans. And they make good stuff at a reasonable price. And I'll talk a little bit more about what I think is not the best about them in a minute, but I would say I would give them 2 big thumbs up for quality construction service. So this is a high quality end that they use with their low capacitance, or what they call their LC1 cable, and this is an all mechanical connection. So the center conductor has a ferrule that's crimped on. You can see the crimp there, and it basically slides in here and it snaps in place here, and it actually works quite well. Well, you haven't had any problems with that. And then the shield ground return path is crimped on. This sleeve here is just crimped on right here. So that's a pretty good construction method for a cable. It's a good quality end. Now, I prefer this copy of a German type of jack, and I prefer them for one main reason, and that is that I can do solder connections instead of mechanical connections, which in my opinion is superior for DC resistance. So the one drawback to many of these connectors, a lot of these ends, we use a mechanical fastener to connect up the shield ground return. So you can see there's a set screws, sometimes there's 2 set screws, and sometimes it's just crimped into place. And what I do is I take advantage of this design in which you can actually solder. You can bring part of the braid through and solder it, and then you can solder the center conductor here. Sometimes they go all the way through. I'm not so keen about that type. They're not the easiest thing to do properly. I like to solder right at this point. You can see there's an isolation little band underneath it. That white band helps to keep the center conductor isolated so that it won't short out. And so it's always possible that if you've got a fault with your cable and cleaning them doesn't fix it, that you actually have either a mechanical connection issue or you've got a solder connection issue. And sometimes you can just take the cable apart and repair it if you're handy. And sometimes, it needs a new end put on it, or it's basically done and needs to be replaced. Okay, now, how do you isolate problems in your system? Well, before I did anything, if I suspected I've got a cable issue, I would get in there and do some cleaning. It doesn't take long. It's not rocket science or heart surgery. You just need a few basic tools, a little bit of time, a little bit of patience with a microfiber cloth, and some isopropyl alcohol. Those are your friends. Deoxit is a friend as well. Whatever you do when you're cleaning jacks and terminals, you don't want to be aggressive. You want to take a little bit of time, and you just want to clean the oxide layer off. You don't want to be so aggressive that if there's, let's say, a gold plating on there, you take that off as well, because that could open up a whole can of worms in which you're now down to the base coating, whatever it is, probably a type of brass, and that'll oxidize a lot quicker than whatever the plating was that was on top. Personally, I'm a big fan of just simply nickel plating, and it'll last a long time, but it will probably form an oxide layer as quickly as a raw brass layer, and it will need to periodically to be cleaned. So when I was a young audiophile, we pulled our entire system apart every New Year's Day, or some day close to it. That was a standard procedure, and we cleaned our cables and we cleaned our jacks and we put everything back together, and usually that would hold the system for a year if you weren't, plugging things in and out constantly like we are. I mean, our critical listening system changes up so often, sometimes multiple times in a day, because we do a lot of listening to kit designs and new prototypes, and we use the actual system that we consider our best system for a lot of those listening tests, so that we can hear, everything, basically. So how do you troubleshoot if you suspect that a cable is down? Well, you clean first, and then you swap. So whenever you're doing troubleshooting in your system, you turn off the whole system. It's the safest thing to do. Let me repeat that. You turn the system off, and then if you suspect that the interconnect cables from one piece of gear to another are responsible after you've cleaned everything up, just swap them. And so take the right and unplug it and put it in the left jack, and take the left and plug it into the right jack. Don't change the cables, just swap them. Turn the system back up, and if the noise or down channel issue moves from the left speaker to the right or the right speaker to the left, then you know that you've actually found the problem, and that cable needs to be replaced or repaired. So get that cable changed out, and most likely you will have discovered the problem. There's a lot of possible problems when you troubleshoot a system that aren't obvious at first. So before you go jumping in and just willy-nilly changing things and swapping things out, and you forget half of what you've done, it's really wise to start with a plan of attack. And just make a quick little cheat sheet, a little list as to how you're going to approach things, and do it step by step. Check off your list, and I guarantee you that as you isolate the problem closer and closer to what the possible remaining issues could be, it'll be a lot easier to say, no, I've checked that and I've checked that, so it can't be that. And you'll eventually say, okay, it's that cable, or it's that tube, or it's that piece of gear. And doing things logically and with a little checklist will just guarantee that you find the problem eventually. And once you start doing that sort of logical troubleshooting procedure, it'll become second nature. We do it all the time. A lot of our troubleshooting happens simply because we've changed something out in the system and forgotten to put it back the way it should be. And we're both equally guilty for that. And there's always an apology. And when our system goes down, we both jump in because we both have been monkeying around with it at some point in time. And usually within about a minute or so, we can isolate it pretty quickly and figure out, it's that cable. And normally, in our case, it's just a wiring issue. But if you've got a static system that normally is running just fine, then you can I would start looking at the tubes first, the cable second, and if the system's down, it's not lamping, then you obviously are going to go straight and take a look at the fuses. Okay, well, I hope that helps everybody out with troubleshooting. I know at this time of year, a lot of you have got new gear in your system, or new to you gear. A lot of people sell up and change up at this time of year, and so a lot of great used gear shows up at very reasonable prices. And if you're new to tubes and new to component-based audio, there's things to learn to catch up that I take for granted because I've been around the audio gear for so long now that it's just second nature to me. But a lot of people don't realize that cleaning your interconnect connection points is just something that audiophiles just do on a regular cycle. Some people even more than once a year. Certainly, if you've developed a problem, you're past due. Anyways, there are 2 really huge orders of vintage tubes inbound as I speak. They're not here yet, so there's really nothing too exciting to show off this week, but I'd be willing to bet that starting next week and the week after, we're probably going to have some amazing stuff to show off. So in the meantime, though, there's a lot of excellent stuff in the store that is, let's see if we can get that to focus. And you can use one of these Cheers codes to save some significant money. There's a secret code that a lot of people have been getting that's easy to figure out. And if you can reach almost everybody around the world with $20 flat rate shipping. And if your order is $150 or more after discount, the shipping's free. Stay safe, everyone. Have fun. I hope you're enjoying a nice break like Charles is. And stay safe, everyone. This is Jim from Valves and More signing off, missing Charles. Cheers, everyone.